today's speakers. I know they need no introduction, but I will do it anyway. Our moderator is Sydney Dillard, partner at Loop Capital Markets and a member of the Chicago Network. And joining her is our special guest, Sallie Krawcheck, the founder and CEO of Ellevest. Ladies, take it away.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. I could not be more excited to have this conversation with you, Sallie. I mean, those of us who've been in the business know the impact that you've had, and we are just so proud of you, and you've always been an inspiration to many of us in the room. So I look forward to just peeling back the onion a little bit around why you are who you are.
Okay.
So let's get into it.
Okay, let's
All right. Okay, so I did a lot of digging. I told you this. Like, I'm kind of an Instagram stalker. I kind of look in, like, at the comments that people make and all that stuff. I, like, read transcripts on some other conversations that you've had, like, all those things. So, but one of the things that I read that I wanted to ask you about was, you know, of growing up, you said, I did not want to be my mom. And I want to talk about, like, what factored into that statement, and then kind of what are you that you didn't want to be in her?
I mean, is this working? Yep. Can you hear me? Okay. First of all, G, thank you so much for that question. Mom's not here, is she?
And she won't read a transcript probably either. Yeah.
Before we get started on that, first of all, thank you so much for hosting me and having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm always happy to do something in Chicago because Chicago has been so good to Ellevest. We have a number of investors here. BMO led our last financing round. I know there's some folks from BMO here, so thank you very much.
Awesome.
Morningstar was our seed investor when I just had a PowerPoint. Penny Pritzker's PSP Capital came in on one of our early rounds. She was very supportive of what we're doing. Melody Hobson is an investor. Valerie Jarrett's an investor. I think I could go on, but suffice it to say, we love Chicago. And really appreciate the support that we've gotten from Chicago. So isn't everyone supposed to rebel against their mother?
Yes.
Isn't that what you're supposed to do?
Yes.
You're supposed to look at what your mom does and say, I want to do the opposite. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom in the 60s, 70s. She and my dad married quite young. They had 4 children in 3 years and 11 months, no twins. Yes.
I just want to
the math actually literally
Does the
works.
math
The math works. The
Okay.
math works. But there are a number of Irish twins in there, and is a very, very intelligent woman who was not able to build a career for herself growing up in South Carolina. And I could feel the constriction of that. In addition, as you might imagine, we didn't have any money. And my parents are still with us, still very much in love. In their 80s, you'll find them making out in the kitchen, for goodness sake, which is a little wild. But that's how in love they are. But the only thing they fought about was money. And they fought about money viciously, to where the kids would hide under the bed. My dad would storm out of the house. And I remember just noting how disempowered my mother was because she didn't have her own money. And in fact, when I got married, I had an early first marriage and outsourced the management of the money to my husband, which worked just fine until I found out that my now ex-husband was having an affair with my now ex-friend. And I didn't know how much money we had. And so I recognized pretty early that money is power and not having money is disempowerment. And in fact, I was at a Chicago dinner when a woman said to me, if you don't control your own money, you don't control your own life. And that's a genesis for founding Ellevest.
You know, and it's really interesting that you talk about that, because one of the other things that I read is your testimony before the House Financial Services Committee and the Diversity and Inclusion Subcommittee, because you talked quite a bit about kind of the importance of money and what power it actually gives women to be able to say, take your hand off of my thigh. I don't have to put up with this crap.
Money is power.
Right.
Money is power. And, you know, we women will not be fully equal with men until we are financially equal with men, and that's just the truth, right? Because, you know, there are women today all over the country, all over the world, who are stuck in marriages they are desperate to leave but don't have the money. and are stuck in dead-end jobs that they can't leave because they don't have the money. Stuck getting chased around a table by the guy who sits in the corner office, the gal who sits in the corner office because they don't have the money. Not able to start a business that they want because they don't have money. So money in a capitalist society is absolutely power. Our challenge is that we talk about the gender pay gap, which is important, which is 80 cents on average for women to a white man's dollar. For women of color, of course, it's tens of cents less. What we don't talk about as much is the gender wealth gap. So pay is how much you bring in. Wealth is how much you have. That is 30 cents to a white man's dollar. For black women, it's a penny. It's been moving in the wrong direction. Why is there a difference between the two? Some is, women tend to spend more on their families, the pink tax, et cetera. But some good chunk of it is women don't invest as much as men do, and therefore don't tap into the wealth-building power of the capital markets nearly as much as men have. And there are lots of reasons for it, too. We also get very disempowering messages around money. The media, men's media around money is very positive, affirmative. CNBC, Bloomberg, Cranes, Barron's, make money, become a CEO. And women's money media is, don't buy the latte, don't have the facial. Financial planning doesn't have to be really, really hard. And women get these messages. Something like 80+% of articles to women around money are negative and disempowering. And of course, she looks around and says, well, it says I'm bad with money. I have less money. Therefore, I must be bad with money. Nowhere does it say, this is not your fault, lady. It's a structural issue. And so because we get the disempowering messages and we have less to start with, we end up even further behind.
And let's talk about kind of how you got really into the flow of capital, right, through kind of your career's journey. You started out, you were a journalism major at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, right? And that would actually kind of come in handy later on, that in ways that we'll talk about. But what was happening down at UNC Chapel Hill that made you feel like you could actually go to Wall Street in your, Laura Ashley dress that you were wearing?
Actually,
what were you thinking?
It's funny you say that, because I started my career on Wall Street at Salomon Brothers. If any of you are old enough to remember it,
yes,
it was the most Wall Street of Wall Street. It was the most, toxic masculinity of any of them. On my very first day, I wasn't quite wearing a Laura Ashley dress, but it was close. I think it was about a Laura Ashley dress, but without the flowers, because I knew better. My first day, I'm standing at my desk, like, look at my desk. I have a phone at my desk. I have pencils. And I smell cigar smoke, and I hear clomp, clomp, clomp. And this portly gentleman, who I thought was in his 60s at the time, this portly gentleman walks by smoking a cigar, looks me up and down, and says, what kind of discount maternity wear is that? Now, he was my boss's boss's boss. And by the way, I thought he was in his 60s, he was in his 30s. Right? So what made me go there to back up? So many of us have a story. I was my goal in high school was to be a cheerleader, mission accomplished. To date the quarterback, mission accomplished. To go to college, in Charleston and become a wife, and go on from there. And had a guidance counselor who literally grabbed my arm one day and said, look at these SAT scores. Look at your grades. You can go as far as you want to. And that moment just crystallized for me, and it immediately applied to the University of North Carolina. I thought, I'm going north. There's no stopping me now. To the north I go. Honest to goodness. And then, on graduation, let's just keep going and let's see how far I can take this. Why not? What do I have to lose? If this doesn't work out, all my family's in Charleston, I can head back. And so went to a Wall Street that, let's just say we talked today about unconscious bias, as I just demonstrated through the little anecdote, I faced conscious bias and active, like, you don't belong here for some period of time.
Yeah. I want to talk about, because you also ended up at Sanford Bernstein, which is where I think, came to know you best.
Yes.
But just underneath all of that, what were you observing about kind of your role as a woman, as a research analyst, kind of what you were seeing that was happening with women? Because I want to kind of then think about like how that informed where you actually ended up, finding your real passion through Ellevest, right? And so what was happening? What were you cataloging along the way?
It's interesting because my career, I've had several pivots. In my 20s, I was an investment banker, very mediocre, very unhappy one. My 30s, I was a research analyst. My 40s, I ran big Wall Street businesses. My 50s, I've been an entrepreneur. So in my 30s, I made the switch from being an investment banker to being a research analyst, and did it by really taking a step back and saying, let's catalog what I'm good at, is there anything I'm great at, what I don't like doing, what I want to do. And, I didn't want to work on a team. I know that's like saying I don't like mom and apple pie, but I wanted an individual contributor job. I loved to write. I loved to do the analysis. I loved dealing with smart people. I wasn't scared of failing. I thought I could take, I wouldn't mind having a high profile. Some people do. I didn't. And it all sort of crystallized for me to, you should go into sell-side equity research. I'd love to say, as happens to so many young women at that age. But I did come to the decision. By the way, I interviewed at every firm: Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs, Nomura, Lehman Brothers, Dillon Reed, all the Japanese banks, et cetera, Smith Barney, where I was turned down because the gentleman who ran it gave me the feedback that he didn't think I would work very hard, which I reminded him of when I fired him when he worked for me later. I just wanted to get that in there.
Yeah, you have to.
Nothing at all to do with what I'm talking about.
But you had to say it.
But being a research analyst was I think it's terrific training for anything, because as a research analyst, you take the same information that everybody else has, and you put it together in different ways. You build sort of a mosaic. You have a hypothesis. You test that hypothesis in public. This stock is going to go up. Did it go up? Did it go down? Yeah. And you're out there with published research reports. So you learn very quickly. You're wrong a lot. And the best are right, 52, 53% of the time. So you learn to make rapid decisions on imperfect information, and you learn to fail in public. The real benefit I got, I think, from being a woman on Wall Street in those days, where I was literally, one of very few. And in my industry that I was covering, which happened to be Wall Street, the only woman covering the industry, was I pretty quickly understood, I'm going to stand out. I'm going to stand out. And
it was okay.
And it turned out to be okay, that if I tried to do what so many analysts did at the time, which is, let me just stay in the pack, I'll just put a market perform on the stock, make a few $million a year, because the industry was hot at the time, and just sort of, stay in the middle, it's going to work out. I'm like, I'm already standing out. So I might as well take that and turn it into a real strength. And so I am never going to publish a piece of research that's a market perform. I'm going to make big calls on big stocks. I'm going to be contrarian all the time, not for the sake of being contrarian, but because I did the research to drive me there. And so as a result of that, I had a couple of big wins early, and pretty quickly got to where you couldn't get away from me, right? Because you try to do it with one of the other analysts. It's that man who has brown hair, right? You should talk to him. He's got glasses, and I think he's at Goldman or Morgan Stanley, and he wears like a blue tie. But you got to talk to the woman. You couldn't miss me. And so as a result of it, I think I became the #1 ranked analyst more quickly than anybody had, because of big calls on big stocks with lots of analysis and not being scared to stand out.
But there was something else, though,
Yes.
right? And so there are some superpowers that we have as women, right? We don't always value them, but it actually came in handy for you, right? Because you didn't actually have to have somebody else type up your research.
Yes, I could type
You could
it,
actually do
yes.
it yourself.
I had been
and
to
so whereas the guy had to have somebody
Yeah.
do it for them, and then you're already out in the market. So these are important things, though,
my
right?
father had sent me to secretarial school to prepare for my future career. So I actually probably am still the fastest typist in this room.
It's, you know,
It's
these
a
are
skill.
skills.
It's a skill.
It's a saying. So, you know, Fortune magazine talked about this piece around kind of your different approach that you just described to, you know, your equity analysis, et cetera. But what is it that, what were you trying to like accomplish in that? You know what I mean? And you said you weren't trying to be a contrarian for contrarian's sake.
Yeah.
But what was it, right? Is it still like I'm not going to be like my mom and I'm going to make a lot of money? Because equity research was different then, right? Because you were actually able to do a little bit of banking because that's kind of what people were doing.
Yes, but yes, I wanted to make money.
Yeah.
Yes, I wanted to be successful. Yes, I wanted to have fun. I figured you have one run at life. Why
Yes.
not live the biggest life you possibly can? But what I wanted to do was also to do a lot of business and do it the right way. So I feel like after they asked, so I was a research analyst for a few years. I feel like after they asked everybody in the department if they wanted to be director of research, and they said no, they finally came to me. And I'm like, okay, I'll be director of research, and I'll run the department. You know, which you can imagine as a woman in her young 30s, and most of the folks in the department were men in their 50s, was a leadership challenge. But we got there. At the time, as you mentioned, research departments did research, where they would publish research, work, you know, for investors, institutional individual investors, trying to get them to buy stocks low and sell high. They also worked along with investment bankers for corporates, where corporates would try to issue stock high and buy it in low.
Yep.
Direct conflict. Who you can't work for both of them at the same time.
Yep.
The entire industry was doing this, including Sanford Bernstein. And as director of research, I said, this is a conflict. Let's get out of the business of investment banking. Let's be the pure research firm. We gave up millions of dollars as a result, which was a lot of money in the day. We began to lose the research analyst because the Morgan Stanleys, et cetera, could pay them so much more because they had the two revenue streams. We couldn't keep up. So we were having people are quitting on the Friday. I'm hiring people on the Monday, training them up, you know, and we almost went out of business. The internet bubble burst right in time for us. Elliot Spitzer came in, said these are conflicts. These research analysts are, you know, saying buy over here, but writing emails that never disappear that say this is a POS over here. The companies had to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in fines. We were the independent research firm, and so I ended up on the cover of Fortune magazine as the last honest analyst. I know, it was like a wow, because the picture was as big as my actual face. It was the damnedest thing. It was literally life-size. I'm like, I thought I cut that mole off my chin. But there's still a trace of it, because I can see it on this magazine. And I ended up, Sandy Weil, some of you may remember, was a titan of finance, ended up calling me and saying, can you come run our research department? I said, no thanks, I've got the best one. He said, what about Smith Barney as well? So I went from, on a Wednesday, running sort of 300 people at Bernstein to 28,000 people on a Thursday to run Smith Barney and turn around the research department. It was really unprecedented.
But then you also, is that when you added wealth management to your responsibilities as well?
I did.
But you had a friend, because you asked for advice on this offer that Sandy made to you.
Yeah.
A friend said, don't do it.
Yeah, my best friend.
You did it anyway. Not the best friend that was that.
No, not that
oh,
same.
okay.
No, she
Okay.
was long gone. Believe me. Believe me. Although they're actually getting a divorce now, so I won.
But what was it, so as you're kind of coming into this experience and you're adding an additional responsibility, it feels to me like that started to create kind of it germinated, like where you actually ended up being today around this wealth management piece?
Yeah. So I had the privilege of running Smith Barney when there was a Smith Barney, the Citi private bank. I was CFO of Citi for a period of time. Yeah. After I left there, I was brought into, I know we've got some B of A folks here. Yeah. I was brought in by Bank of America to turn around Merrill Lynch when they bought it during the financial crisis. And was there for a couple of years and then was reorged out after we got Merrill turned around. So I've had real ups and downs. I mean, I'm the only woman who's been fired on the front page of the Wall Street Journal twice. Maybe why I'm here, since I hold that world record. But, you know, look, you go in to do a turnaround, right? The turnaround ends, your job can end. And, you know, success and failure are different sides of the exact same coin. If you're out there, you know, taking risks, doing things differently, it can work out and then it can't work out. So I had the privilege of you know, really turning around and running these storied institutions. But what I noticed when I was on Wall Street, and some of you may have noticed too, there were a lot of men. And what I also noticed...
One or two.
A few. In fact, for a few stats for you, 98% of mutual funds are run by men, mutual fund dollars, even though women are shown to be as good or better investment managers than men. 99% of investment dollars are managed at investment firms owned by men. 90+% of traders are men. 86% of financial advisors are men, average age in their 60s. It's a man's world. It may or may not be a coincidence that women don't invest as much as men do. And so that's where... And another stat for you, that men tend to leave their financial advisor, very much trust their financial advisor, as they should. Trust their financial advisor more than their doctor. Don't leave their financial advisor over the course of their lives. However, when that money goes to her, and it does because, ladies, you may know, we live 6 to 8 years longer than the men in our lives. 80% of us die single, whether we want to or not. 90% of us manage our money on our own at some point in our lives, whether we want to or not. And when that money comes to us, we leave that same financial advisor over the next year at a rate of 80 to 90%. And so I like to say, in the wealth management industry, there's perfect product market fit between men and their financial advisor. Yeah. And historically, there's been no product market fit between women and that same financial advisor. Not because people don't mean to, but we've, you know, in my view, the industry of Wall Street, we built a business, men built it for men. They didn't mean to, they did. And so we came up with the idea of why don't we build something really specifically for women in Ellevest.
Well, you know, it's interesting because, you know, given all of the C-suite roles that you've had, but you also have a family, and right, and there oftentimes that does have an impact on women and their earning power and therefore their ability to be able to invest to build wealth. Sure. How did you manage that, right? Because there are a lot of things you can outsource, right? But you can't outsource love and sex. Yeah. So how'd you do
then.
it? I mean, you could, but...
Alrighty then. Okay, settle down, everybody. Settle down, you. So, there is not a gender pay gap up until you have children. And when a family has children, women get hit. There's a gender tax. There's on them a baby tax. And men actually have a baby bonus, where women are viewed as you're not as committed, you're not going to be around as much, you're probably going to leave, and this is all implicit and subconscious. And for men, it's you're more responsible, you're really becoming, you know, family man, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's where the gender pay gap actually kicks in. Now, you know, for me, you know, I've sort of thought you can't do it all. It's really just not possible. And quite frankly, I think this have it all is sort of a trick they're playing on us, a lie they're telling us, additional hurdle for us to get over. So for men, if you're successful in business, that's enough. I remember when I was CFO of Citi and I was on a panel with other top CFOs, and I was the one who got the work-life balance question. And I remember thinking, it's not enough that I'm the CFO of what was then the largest bank in the world. I also have to have work-life balance. Like, it's another hurdle that's been put in front of me. Right. So I made a decision early on that there are going to be points in my life where I'm going to shoot for excellence, my job, for many years, and there are other places I'm going to shoot for mediocrity. And I always loved to joke, don't get offended, anybody, I was a mediocre mother, which means medium, like 50th percentile, okay? 50th percentile, right there in the pack with the other moms, but not the I bake cookies, but not the stay up till all night to make the cookies, to put in the box and blah, blah, blah. I'd buy the cookies, etc. I was never like, clean up your room. I'm like, you'll clean it up when it's filthy enough that you're going to want to clean it up. And so I just made some choices. Now, there were times when I went for excellence as a mother. Both of my kids had some health challenges along the way. And you could not pull me out of their hospital room, like literally could not pull me out. And so finding that right balance. The one thing I did, though, as my career took off and my kids were younger, is I'm going to be traveling a lot. I was fortunate enough to have a husband who pulled back on his career. He's going to be around more, but you can always call me on my cell if you need me. Yeah. And if you need me, I will pick up. And they said, okay, Mommy. So one quick anecdote. When I was brought in to run Smith Barney, I had the first call with all of the branch managers, and this is a crusty group. I think I can say that. If any of you were here, it was a crusty group of old style brokers who'd made it up through the system and moved around the country several times. I think there were 2 women in the group, all older than me, crusty. And I am doing being introduced to them. This is the boss of the firm, blah, 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 blah. And I'm sitting there, welcome, and we're going to do the blah, blah, blah. My cell phone rings. I look, it's my daughter, who's 6 or something at the time. Ugh, I promised her I would pick up the phone. So I'm like, I apologize, gentlemen and lady. I have a phone call I need to take. And so I, put it on hold. And of course, they're all like, is it Sandy Weil calling her? Is it the Fed? What is it? I pick up the phone. I'm going to go, yes, sweetie pie, what you need? She said, Mommy, where'd you put the nail polish remover? That was her emergency. And so I got back on the phone and told them that's what happened. And sort of tried to set a tone for, we've got these lives and they're full lives. And the couple of women on the call were like, oh, thank goodness.
Exactly. You've talked about the feminization of wealth, right? So as a first-gen college graduate, I was actually jealous because I'm not getting anything from my parents. I mean, I got a lot of great things from them, but wealth isn't going to be one of them. So how are you advising your clients that, who they're going to benefit from a major transfer of wealth, but then there's some that are not? Sure. Right? And so what does that mean to, what you're doing at Ellevest around really helping women to grow from a wealth perspective?
So 2 things, feminization of wealth and what you do if you're not getting it, or even if you are getting it. So we've all heard of the great wealth transfer. Yep. The baby boomers have amassed the most wealth in the history of the planet and are beginning to, they're hitting old age and they're hitting the great beyond. And we all think about that money going to millennials and Gen Z, et cetera. It's going to the wives first. The gentlemen pass away, it's going to the wives, and then it's going to the daughters. And the great wealth transfer is about to do what Lean In did not, which is to get the majority of wealth in this country into the hands of women because of our longevity. It's an amazing thing because when women have money, we use it differently than men do. Nothing against how you gentlemen use money, but we give more to nonprofits. When women have more money, we give more to our community. Our society is stronger. We give more to candidates who champion women's issues, which are all of our issues, et cetera. So we love to say at Ellevest, nothing bad happens when women have more money. And this is beginning to happen. And that's what we call the feminization of wealth, which is a pretty terrific thing. By the way, all the women aren't confident around money. Forget it. We did research at Ellevest. When women have money, they become confident, right? It's not, we don't have it because we're not confident. It's like, give it to us, we get confident, and great things happen. So that's fantastic, right? And that, we hate to see you gentlemen go, but if you have to go,
we've got it from here.
Good news. And we're seeing that at Ellevest. We're seeing that transfer begin to happen. You're right, though. It's people who already have money who are getting the money.
Yes.
All right, how do you build wealth? If you don't have it, or how do you build wealth? So there have only been, I think, two scalable means of pretty, reliably building wealth in this country. And they both have to do with compounding. Yeah. That mathematical thing that happens when your money makes money on your money. And then your money makes money on your money on your money, and then your money makes money on your money on your money on your money, right? Where you have the snowball effect. Warren Buffett, the greatest investor of all time, has one big secret, and it's called compounding. Mm-hmm. All right? And so it's beginning early and staying in the market. So there have been two ways for individuals to access compounding sustainably. One has been to buy home. And so many of our grandparents, they bought this home and it was $10,000 and now it's $5,000. Great. A couple of problems with buying a home. First of all, has been redlining, so it's been unavailable to large parts of the population.
That's right.
The second part, is you've had to have a down payment, so you had to have money to get money. You had to take out a mortgage, so you have to have leverage. You have to pay money for the yard and pay the insurance, and it's illiquid. If you want to sell it, you might not be able to. But real estate has compounded about 3% a year. Great. The other way is through investing in the markets. If you had invested in the markets any year since the beginning of the 1900s, the markets have compounded 10% a year. And in fact, for all that we think of investing as risky, if you invested on any day and stayed in the market for 15 years because of that upward momentum, because of compounding, you had a 98% chance of a positive return. For 20 years, it was a 99% chance of a positive return. And if you had a recurring deposit, it was a 100% chance of a positive return. But guess what? You don't have to have a lot of money to invest. In our digital offering at Ellevest, you can start with $1, right? You don't have to take out a mortgage, and it's liquid. That has been the secret of building wealth in this country. Had Donald Trump invested in the stock market instead of real estate, he would be much richer than he is today, just because of the power, because you're betting on the underlying economy and the underlying innovation, which for all the trouble in the world and all the bad things, the capitalism has won out. And so, for anyone, for women, for young, for those of us who have kids in their 20s, getting them to just invest, start with some small amount and just become an investor and get used to that volatility you see along the way, that has really been the ticket to building generational wealth.
And you have led large companies, mm-hmm. and then you do a startup,
yep.
and you get investors.
Yep.
What's different about how you lead at Ellevest than how you've led over the years at larger companies?
It's more hands-on at Ellevest. I write the newsletter in addition to going out and raising money, running the company day to day. All of us are, player coaches. It's not you sit in your fancy office and sort of drive directions. I personally love that, but a lot of people don't. But for those of you who, so I get the question often, do you just love being an entrepreneur, Sallie? And the answer is no, absolutely not. It is incredibly difficult. Raising money is hard. Coming up with a problem to solve is hard. Coming up to the solution to the problem to solve is hard. Recruiting people to a new idea is hard. Getting the right people is hard. If you get the wrong person mm-hmm. at the wrong time, you're out of business. Right. And typically you're successful 50% of the time with hiring somebody. And so you just don't have, as with a corporation, others to fill in. Everything about it is difficult. Breaking through is hard. And, we've been building Ellevest. I didn't really realize when we started that in addition to all of that, we'd have to build a brand, because women aren't going to give you their money to invest, if they've never heard of you before. We had to build a community, because there was no place for women to go to ask those questions about money, to learn about money. And so we had to end up solving a bunch of different problems at the same time. There were a couple of investing and wealth management firms targeted to women that started about the same time we did, and they all failed. Because you just have to get so much of it right, and then you have to have the luck of it as well. But we've got a great team in place, and we've reached $2.3 billion of assets under management, and Investment News named us the 8th fastest growing RIA in the country. So something's working.
That's amazing. So let me ask you this about this brand building, right? Because you actually almost went into marketing. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, though, but as you were thinking, I've got to move away from Wall Street. But did you find it all with women? There's something in the Black community we talk about, like the white man's ice is colder. Like, did women feel like the men's ice was colder than coming from you as a woman? Do you know what I mean?
Because I totally know what you mean. So when we launched the digital offering first and the private wealth offering second. By the way, for those of you who are wondering, as I mentioned, we have no minimum to invest. We also have no maximum for those who are interested. And Sarah, are you here? Sarah, financial advisor. Did you? There we go. There she is. There she goes. So when we launched, Ellevest, we went out with some Facebook ads, and we were, very invest like a woman, and had these really sharp images, and so we got some real interest. And I would say, 60% of women, oh, that's sort of interesting. I take a look at that. I wonder, I'm curious about that. But something like 30% of women, how dare you? How dare you? I don't need some dumbed down, pink it and shrink it, let's drink Chardonnay and talk money, little offering for women with little words. And then what would happen? So we were like, whoa, my goodness, how about that? And then what would happen is they would go into the product, and the product is sophisticated. It is the only investing algorithm that takes gender into account, which matters if you're a woman, because you earn less, you take more career breaks, your salary peaks sooner, and you live longer. And so if you don't take that into account, you of course risk running out of money. And so this was a sophisticated offering built over 2 years, with the chief investment officer as PhDs in computer science, applied math, and engineering economic systems, and 30 years in the industry. Like, we're not around, okay? But they'd pop out and they'd say, this is actually more sophisticated. And by the way, it's also beautiful. And by the way, it's also sort of fun. Oh, okay, I'll take a look. But the wildest thing about it is that not one single solitary woman said it's for women, it must be better. And that, my friends, is the patriarchy at work.
Yep.
Right? Well, don't applaud. Boo. Boo. And so that's when we began to recognize, and we talked about it a little. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning, that not only at Ellevest do we need to was it our responsibility to build a profitable company, but we also had to change the way we talk about and think about money as women. We had to change that, we think if we're, we get the message that if we're asking for a raise, we're asking for too much. If we're seen to want money, we're seen as being unattractive. Gloria Steinem has said, this is the trick that the patriarchy played on women. That they convinced us that being bad with money is cute and fun and flirty, right? That being good with money is masculine and unattractive. And that actually the big miss of the 70s feminist movement, the movements up till then, is we didn't focus on wealth creation. Because so many feminists came from the left, and so they were, really looking at, sort of community organizing. And building wealth was, again, seen as something that was, capitalist and masculine, and we don't need to copy that. And we have lost ground on wealth to men every year since. And so that's really what we're trying to fix at Ellevest.
I love it. What have you done around kind of diversity and inclusion in the context of what you're doing, right? To be able to attract to this broader audience that, the market doesn't see in the same way as you.
So let's be clear, diversity and inclusion is not a nice to do. It's not it is a nice to do, and it should do, and it's a fairness, and it's whatever. And it's also, the numbers, as a recovering research analyst, folks, the numbers are so friggin' compelling. Back when I was a research analyst, the question I got at every single meeting I ever went into from every single portfolio manager is the leadership team any good? Is the team any good? And I could have an opinion, but I went back and regressed everything I could find against management performance. Was it tenure? Was it how long the team worked together? Was it that they went to an Ivy League? Was it they were from Chicago? What was it? The only driver, statistically significant driver of outperformance for those teams was diversity. And of course and by the way, diversity of all kinds, of ethnicity, of gender, of background, of education, of orientation. Of course that's the case. Because if you have everybody like everybody, you might as well just have one person. You want to get all those viewpoints into a room. By the way, it's my point of view that lack of diversity was one of the things that led Wall Street into the subprime crisis. Because everyone was thinking the same as opposed to thinking differently. Okay, so how do you then get a diverse company? The problem is that often clashes with meritocracy. Because in meritocracy, you got to let your managers manage. And as a result of that, the CEOs believe in diversity. The middle managers who went to one unconscious bias training class 3 months ago, right, and know I should promote somebody like me, but I only get one promotion a year, so I'm not very good at it, and I don't do it very often, and I would promote a woman of color, but this young white guy, I'm telling you, he's got something. He just reminds me of someone who I don't know, somebody that's familiar to me, who I really like, and I don't know, I just have a good feeling about him, so I'm going to override the research, in order to promote someone like me. And that's why and then we let them, because you got to let your managers manage. It's a meritocracy, right? And that's why middle management is where diversity goes to die. And at Ellevest, what we did was we said, we know the research tells us that at a startup, the diversity, or lack thereof, is set at 12 people. That whatever you have at 12 people is what you end up with. Just because that you start to tap into your networks. And so at about person 11, I put my foot down and said, we are good on middle-aged white women with blonde hair, bottle blonde hair from the South, and actively overrode our managers' decisions. My co-founder, had a fit, because you got to let your managers manage. And I said, we've taken in money from Penny Pritzker and Melinda Gates, and Rethink Impact and Melody and I'm not going to have this knowledge and then say we got to let our managers manage. I'm going to override, because we know that that's the power of diversity. And so we did, and therefore, today we are the mirror image of Wall Street. Whereas Wall Street is 85% men, call it, we're 85% women. And so we're still today majority women owned. The board is majority women, the company is majority women.
I love it. Yeah. I just have one last question for you. So for those women in the audience who are thinking about going down an entrepreneurial path like you have, after having been in large companies, et cetera, what advice would you give them?
I know I'm supposed to say, go for it.
Yes,
follow your dreams. Okay, that's it. That's the answer. Look, it's hard. It's hard. So again, the research tells us that companies run by diverse teams or run by women outperform those run by men. That's just what the research shows. And in fact, for startups, what you see is that women, I know nothing about baseball, but women are more likely to hit singles and doubles and triples, and men are more likely to, swing for the fences and either hit a home run or wipe out. As a result, the results for women are better. But you get more of the big home runs from the men. It just is what it is. Women today, if we'd been here a couple weeks ago, I would have said women get 2% of venture dollars. In the past year, it's 1%. Now, just stop for a second and think about what that means. That means a lot of businesses are not founded. It also means for those that are, if you're getting 2%, by definition, it means that for every meeting a gentleman has to raise money, a woman has 50. For every model a gentleman sends out to investors, a woman sends 50. For every set of due diligence questions, she gets 50. For every stupid question he gets that he can't believe he has to answer, she gets 50. Now, the odds are already stacked against you for starting a business, but you have to take 50 times as long. And so every woman-run business that's IPO'd, you hear, she'll say, I had, and by the way, nobody gets funded in one meeting, so it's not 50 meetings, it's 400. Right? And so every time you see a woman ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, it's, well, I had hundreds of meetings, nobody believed in me. And then that's taking you away from the startup, which is already incredibly difficult and set up for failure. So, if you want to do something, just make sure you are so passionate about it that you are willing to put in that kind of time. And then go for the women. And so the mistake I made when we were raising money the first couple of rounds for Ellevest is I went to Silicon Valley, and these are people whose job it is to invest in companies, and so I then tried to convince them of our view of the world. And that did not work. And I could convince, by the way, anybody one-on-one, but they would get into their partners meeting and it would fall apart pretty quickly, right? Because someone would say, what if Fidelity gets in? And they wouldn't know the answer that women are half the population. It's okay if Fidelity gets in too. They would collapse, right? So what I did instead, and this is the case with Penny Pritzker, is I said, well, and at the time she didn't have her venture arm, so she wasn't doing that type of investing. But I said, what if instead I go to people who have money, believe in our view of the world, and ask them to invest? And that was much more successful. And so for those of you women who are thinking about starting something, the difference between when I started Ellevest and today is there are many more women who were investing in seed rounds and Series A's. And so finding those angel networks and finding those individuals who can give you that seed funding in something that they and you believe in is easier and is a better path to success. The big checks, we'll worry about that later. But women supporting women, men have been doing it for forever, right? They've been funding each other, investing each other, talking each other up, putting each other on the boards. I would propose that though we as women have received messages in the book aisle, Lean In, My Book, Own It, Know Your Worth, et cetera, is all about how we do it as an individual. The stronger way to do it is as a team. And so making sure that we're supporting each other and recognizing the excess returns that can come from it is pretty important.
Sallie, thank you for your passion. Thank you for being with us today. It's been a pleasure for me to spend this time with you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And so now I invite Maria Doughty to give some closing remarks. Maria, turn it over to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Maria Doughty. I am the president and CEO of the Chicago Network. And on behalf of our organization and the Executives Club of Chicago, I'd like to thank Sallie and Sydney for an enlightening and comical and colorful language discussion. That was tremendous. No, you're in safe space. I know that I speak for all of us when I say we really, truly enjoyed listening to you and learning from you. And I love that word, crusty. Oh my gosh, I'm going to use it. All Your insights on how investment can serve as a tool for reducing economic disparities and promoting equality are invaluable. By focusing on equitable access to capital and fostering inclusive economic growth, we can create opportunities that empower women and drive systemic change. Let's continue to challenge the status quo and work towards a future where economic equality is a reality for all women. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before you head out, if you haven't done so yet, on the table is a QR code. It's a survey. We'd love to get your feedback if you don't mind doing it before you leave if you haven't already done so. Enjoy the rest of your day after this incredibly inspirational morning. Thank you.